This episode is brought to you by Betadine. When you feel the sign, Betadine. Hello, and welcome back to the Rebel Mama podcast. I'm Nikita Stanley.
And I'm Aleks Jassem.
And we are your hosts, your guides, your shepherds of all things pleasure.
And today our focus is on pleasure as it pertains to sex. And of course, we brought in a bona fide expert to chat through it with us.
We have been following the one and only Dr. Jess for years because we love her candor and her approach. But before we dive into it, we're going to riddle off a list of all of her credentials.
Get ready.
Sit back and relax, Dr. Jess.
And don't fall asleep.
Okay, here we go. Dr. Jess is a Toronto-based sexologist with a PhD. She's an author, a television personality, and her training includes courses on counseling skills, healthy relationships, resolving sexual concerns, sex education, clinical sexology, sexual development, sex and disability, group therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. Was that enough?
Yeah. I don't know if that's updated, but yeah.
Okay, we got more.
Stop learning.
Alongside her academic and television credentials, Dr. Jess is also an accomplished author with 4 best-selling titles.
Congrats, babe.
Thanks. You know books. You make dozens of dollars. I'm a dozenaire.
Dozens of dollars.
I'm 100-aire.
Accurate. Well, her latest book, The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, Techniques and Strategies for Mind-Blowing Sex, co-authored with Maria Renee Stewart, has received rave reviews from professionals and clients alike. Jess has worked with thousands of couples from all corners of the globe to transform their relationships via her wildly successful Marriage as a Business program, and is also Tinder Canada's dating and relationship expert. No big deal.
That's why I downloaded Tinder. And my partner's always like, why are you always on Tinder? Babe, it's my job.
It's where I am working. Yeah, it's very important. If you want to learn more, visit her website at happiercouples.com and explore her course offerings that include the likes of mind-blowing oral and mindful sex. But do not do that until after you've listened to this episode, because we have her right here in the flesh.
In the flesh.
To answer all of your and our burning questions about all things sex and pleasure. So welcome to the podcast.
Quite
Dr.
the intro.
Jess.
It is. Thank you so much for exaggerating my accomplishments. Really, I think my mom might have written that. That sounds like something my mom would say about me.
I love it. We all need a good cheerleader. We're happy to be yours.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And I think my mom is too. It's like when I wrote my first book, she ordered 10 of them because she was afraid no one would buy them.
Oh my God, how sweet. That's what parents do. They're our best promoters.
She's also a hoarder.
And I love
I shouldn't say that.
And I love that they're not just books she's hoarding. They're like sex books. It's like mind-blowing sex and oral, like hoarding them on the shelf.
Yeah.
People come over for tea.
Maybe she's giving them out.
I think so. It's like the lube. My aunties are always asking about more of that stuff.
Oh my God.
Because the biggest perk, right, of being a sexologist is that lifetime free supply of lube.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And they want it.
I love that they want
As
it.
they should. They deserve it, actually.
She's a very important part of the family gatherings, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is Jess coming to Thanksgiving?
We
Most
don't love her
importantly.
company, but we love what's in her purse.
Yes, we want the swag bags.
Well, and it's a very near and dear topic to our hearts, too.
Yes.
I love sex, so thanks for being here.
That's good to hear because a lot of people aren't loving sex.
Oh,
I
God,
know.
no. That's
we
a
hear
shame.
a lot. We do hear a lot.
Yeah.
And we are going to get to some community questions after, because we have a private community with like 11,000 moms in there. And yeah, there's sex is a complicated topic these days. So we'll get to those questions for sure, but not everyone's loving it. I'll give you that much.
Especially after parenthood, motherhood, and divorces, separations, age, all of it. Because it's super fun when you're like 25.
Totally.
You don't have a care in the world, but things change.
Yes. We evolve.
We do. We still love sex.
She really wants to drive this home.
Yes.
We love sex here.
And tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I'm 44 now and I'm like peaking at like my sexual desire and sensuality and stuff. Like I always have been a sexual person, but this is like...
It's pretty common for folks in their 40s to either completely drop off or really go the other way and peak.
Okay,
Well,
definitely
way to
ramped
go,
up.
babe.
Yeah, you went the right way up the mountain.
Yes, she has. She's like a hockey stick. Up she goes. Okay, so let's start with a basic question that was kind of rooted in your bio for me. But I want to know the difference between a couples therapist and a sexologist. And how do people know what is the right one for them?
Right. So both of those can be to some degree umbrella terms. So sexologist generally refers to anybody who studies sex. So sexologists might be teachers, they might be therapists, they might be counselors, they might be more in entertainment. So it's a bit of an umbrella term. Some sexologists are sex therapists or couples therapists. Some couples therapists also have a background in sexology. So how do you know what you need? So when we think about therapy, we're thinking about ongoing individualized support. Oftentimes, depending on like your jurisdiction, they may support you in mental health. They may support you in the relationship. You'll run into also sex coaches who are doing coaching, but not intensive therapy, and they don't usually have a background there.
Okay.
So listen, I think anybody can benefit from a broad range of support. But if you're in a relationship and you're struggling, you're probably looking for a couples therapist. And that couples therapist may also be a sex therapist. They might be a psychologist. They might be a social worker. So you really have to ask what their specialty is. And my view is that many good therapists will hop on a call with you just to get to know you a little bit, to make sure not only they're a fit for you, but also you're a fit for them. Because part of having I think a well-boundaried practice is being willing to refer out when it's not the perfect fit.
Right. And that's the responsibility, you think, of the therapist to say, maybe it's not me, but I would recommend
Oh yeah, I think they would.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. A good therapist will do that. And I don't want to put all the onus on the therapist. I think as individuals, we also have a lot of agency, and therapy has changed, right? When we think about how our parents perceived therapy, it was lying on a couch and talking about your childhood, and it could take years, and it wasn't particularly present focused or future focused or solution focused. But people are now going to therapy for check-ins, right? Just because you have a therapist doesn't mean you need to go every week. Some therapists are really flexible. So you got to find somebody who's a fit for you.
Yeah.
Shout out to my therapist, Carla.
I was going to say,
she is the best.
I mean, I also think it's really hard to find the right therapist for you, and a good one that works with your whatever it is, your vibe, someone you can talk to, someone that understands you. So any tips for that? Or maybe we can include in our notes your favorites or...
So I don't think it would be my personal favorites. I really think it has to do with fit. And I think identity plays a big role. So for me, I've, had multiple therapists over the years, only a handful, but I've landed on Carla, who is Caribbean. And I think that there's a real understanding of my background. I don't have to explain and contextualize familial issues. So I think oftentimes it's not that you have to have a queer therapist if you're queer, or an Asian therapist if you're Asian. But my experience in terms of like my intersectionalities or my identity, that's what works for me. And I think that a lot of therapists are also saying, I want to support people with whom I'm in community, because it's not necessarily a hierarchical relationship like it used to be. It's not as though the therapist has the knowledge and you're there only to gain. It is an exchange. It's a dynamic. That's not to say that your friends can practice therapy on you, because we've got friend-to-pee going around where people say, oh, my friends are my therapists. Your friends are a really important source of social, emotional support, but they're not practicing therapy.
Right.
So I think identity matters when it comes to finding a therapist.
I think that's a great tip, actually. And a lot of people aren't willing to say that out loud, but I do think that that's a great, I think it's fair to take that into account when you're looking for somebody. So we are trying to inspire people to pursue pleasure this season with our podcast, because we spent a lot of time last season on women's health issues. And
we touched on sex health in that too.
We did, but now we just want people to go after the pleasure piece, pleasure for pleasure's sake. So can you talk about some of the broad benefits of tapping into your sexuality as a source of pleasure? Like, what does it do for the rest of your life?
Well, it's all integrated, right? When we think about pleasure, it is something that we seek in every area of our life, from the emotional to the relational to the physical to the spiritual, and then eventually or finally to the erotic. And they all really intersect. I really like that you're talking about pleasure for pleasure's sake, because pleasure is often treated as a footnote, as a corollary, as something that you get, but you have to justify pleasure through some other means, right? Yeah, it felt really good, but it also made us feel really more connected.
Yeah.
Well, connection is a form of pleasure. You may not always consider it erotic pleasure, but if we think about erotic pleasure specifically, there are so many benefits. So we've got physiological benefits where we are feeling, we're improving blood flow to the genital region, to the pelvic region. We are seeing our heart rate get up. We're getting adrenaline. We're getting oxytocin, which has a palliative effect on the body. So there's, research around menstruation from my friends over at Womanizer, and they looked at using masturbation to alleviate the symptoms of menstruation. Sorry, I'm confusing masturbation, menstruation, but it's menstruation. So there can be pain relief. There can be physical connection.
Interesting.
And there are so many, like we can look at data, for example, and we can't call it causal, but we can call it correlational, in which we see connections between sexual activity and cognitive function, sexual activity and lower levels of desire and anxiety, sexual activity and quality of relationships. And quality of relationships determine the quality of our lives. And we know that, what do we live for? We live for human connection, whether it's a casual interaction with a barista, whether it's a friendly interaction with a neighbor, maybe who's not the closest to you, whether it's, interaction with family, friends, and of course with intimate partners. There is nothing more valuable in our lives than relationships. And for intimate relationships, sex is a part of it. Whether you don't have to have all the sex, you don't have to do all the sex, you don't have to have the hottest sex of your life, but at minimum, you have to talk about sex.
Ooh, that's something that we have to get to later in the conversation too. There were a lot of questions around communication when it comes to sex. So we're going to get you to shine a light on that for sure.
It's a great stress relief, I will say.
Absolutely.
And even if you're not having sex, if you're masturbating, like if you're stressed out or have high levels of anxiety and things seem overwhelming, go masturbate.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's the neurochemical response.
You get your glow up and you're like, okay, I feel better now. It's kind of like I actually, and like taking walks and things like that. It's like in there with your self-care.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just looking at the ocean can calm you.
Right.
Being in the forest or in nature can calm you. Sex, of course, can calm you. You've got that oxytocin that's doubling. There's even some preliminary research around DHEA, which we know dehydroepiandrosterone, which is associated with shiny hair and glowing skin, and those levels being higher post-sex.
Hey, that's why you look so good.
I masturbated 3 times.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be partnered sex. Sex means different things to different people. I think that we get very hung up on like PV sex, penis going in a vagina, but that in fact is the least effective route to actual orgasm. Not that orgasm is the end all be all, but a lot of us like those. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for women. Exactly.
Men are like, I love it.
I put it in.
They do all right.
Yeah. They sure do.
Okay. You had here your question about her TED Talk.
Yeah. So I loved your TED Talk on monogamish, and everybody should go and watch it after this as well. But I want to talk about the state of monogamy right now. And does this concept have the potential to save monogamy?
That's really interesting. So I don't think that there's any format that will inevitably and universally save relationships. I don't think that monogamy is the answer. I don't think that ethical non-monogamy is the answer. I don't think that the spectrum of monogamish in between is the answer for everyone. But I think what's super important is that we stop assuming that we all want monogamy. I think that kind of turning to monogamy as our default setting without actually considering what we want is quite dangerous, because we do have data showing increasing divorce rates. It's difficult to predict divorce rates. You can look at crude divorce rates, but if divorce is around 41%, we've got 24% of people who acknowledge that they are cheating on their partners. I can tell you from working with people, it's a lot higher than that. We have declining marital and relational satisfaction rates, especially after kids, and it takes a very long time to come back up if you stay together. So the state of relationships is concerning. And so at minimum, we should be talking about, what do these relationships look like? How do we structure them? So to go back to the concept of monogamish, so my TED Talk is a little bit old. And at the time, it was quite edgy. If I were to redo it today, I'd probably push harder. But the kind of long and the short of it is that you can be monogamous, but also play with other ideas in conversation, in thought, in fantasy, because the notion that you can only want one person, only be attracted to one person for the rest of your life, I would consider that a form of potential, with exceptions, because I know people will be sensitive about this, but that's a form of potential toxic monogamy, whereby it's imposed, whereby we're trying to police thought. And it is impossible to suppress thoughts. In fact, we have data, the white bear experiments. If we try and suppress a thought, we actually we have that thought more often. And so trying to do that around sex, coupling that with shame, coupling that
and
with
the obligation and things like that, it starts to become a negative and not a positive, which can impact you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so monogamish is meant to get people thinking outside of the box. And it's not to say you must do it this way. So I don't see it as the universal solution, but I see it as a solution.
Yeah.
Right. And there are also people, there's also some preliminary research around whether being monogamous versus ethically non-monogamous or polyamorous that could fall under that, whether those are orientations, relationship orientations. So am I monogamous in behavior or am I monogamous kind of at my core? And we're not going to ever be able to fully answer those questions.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But I work with so many couples who are in some ways ethically non-monogamous. Like I just came off this couples cruise in Turkey, and it's, 700 couples or something like that. And there's a playroom, and I'd say 50% of them would consider themselves monogamous, but they're going into this playroom and they're being around other people who are naked, other people who are playing. Maybe they're voyeurs, maybe they're exhibitionists, and they would probably identify not as ethically non-monogamous at the core in terms of identity, but they would perhaps consider themselves monogamish or ethically non-monogamous in behavior. So I think there's this differentiation between behavior and identity, because there are a lot of people who would say I'm monogamous, but then, I don't know, they go to a sex club once in a while.
Well, you
and
need
that's fine.
like a safe space to explore too, because you are human. So I think with marriage, probably people should be having these conversations before, because you do you get married when you're young a lot of the time, and you're just like, oh, this person's so great to be with. They're fun. They're amazing. I love having sex with them. And then all these marital obligations and expectations kind of like mount up over the years, right? All of a sudden you're together for 10 years or 15 years, you have kids, and you're like, wait, am I still supposed to be feeling the same way? What if I'm into other things? What if you start to outgrow certain things and evolve sexually? Like, am I allowed to do this? Like, I hate that part of what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, because as a human being, your natural, like, you should just be following that lead, right? And like at the end of the day, it's making everyone feel good. Like love is love. Like there's nothing bad.
You should have been born in the 70s.
I know. I miss.
No, but you're really
raised in the
right.
70s.
There's a fear though that if we try something new, if we move into new territory, if we push a boundary, I'm going to lose something I care about. And that's why if you want the passion, if you want the fun, if you want the risk, if you want to have these conversations, first you have to have the fundamental, safe relationship with understanding and trust and honesty and equality and respect. So we need the basis before we can have any fun. And the reality is we have no training in relationships. We prepare for weddings, but we don't prepare for marriage. And we need to shift that norm.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, this is a good point to take a little pause for a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to dive into the different types of desire, eroticizing daily interactions, and more. So don't go anywhere.
Ever had a kid cough or sneeze directly into your mouth? We sure have. That's why we've learned to keep our medicine cabinets stacked with the most effective products for the whole family. The minute we feel that dreaded first sign of a throat tickle or sniffle, we reach directly for Betadine, with products clinically proven to defend against colds and provide relief from symptoms like sore throat. We can keep on keeping on. To be sure Betadine products are right for you and your family, always read and follow the label. The indicated age varies for each Betadine product. Feel the sign? Betadine. All right, talk to us about the different types of desire. How can knowing your desire type help you take control of your sexuality? What are the desire types? What does it look like?
Well, there's probably a broad spectrum, but oftentimes we divide desire into two buckets. So spontaneous desire, like I worked all day, helped the kids with their homework, put them to bed, talked to my mother-in-law, and then got into bed, and I spontaneously was in the mood. And I was like, oh, I also want to get on top. It's spontaneous.
Right.
And then we think about responsive desire, whereby you have that same day, but you're not in the mood, but you remember that sex feels good, or your partner's in the mood, and you say, I'm not in the mood, but let's see what we can do to put me in the mood. So spontaneous desire is usually desire, then arousal, plateau, orgasm, etc. And responsive desire, you actually have to get physically aroused first before the desire in your head follows. Because the bottom line is, with our busy lifestyles, with oftentimes the way we move through life rather mindlessly, our engagement with technology and not with each other, it's easy to lose spontaneous desire for sex. If you wait until you're in the mood for sex, and if you wait until you're both in the mood for sex at the same time, you may never have sex again, right? It may never happen. And so we have to cultivate desire. So sometimes I think the problem is the language even of libido, this idea of sex drive. So I need to eat, I need to drink water, I need to sleep, I need to breathe to live. Those are drives. The desire for sex may be universal in some way, but I'm not going to die without sex. I know it feels like you're going to die without sex.
I would die without sex.
She would die. I can already tell. 5 minutes together.
Okay.
Yeah. Hang on. Do I still have noodles?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
I have pasta and
I was
dumplings.
going to say, if pasta's still around, I'll be okay.
That's fine. You heard it here first, as long as she has pasta.
But that idea of libido being something that lives inside of you, as opposed to something that you can draw out, I think leaves us wanting, leaves us feeling broken, leaves us pathologizing partners. If somebody has low or no desire, immediately we're like, check your hormones. Is it your diet? Are you exercising? It may be physiological, but it may also be lifestyle related. Yeah. Are you dealing with sadness? Are you dealing with drain? Are you dealing with burnout, with bore out, with all of these concepts that take away from desire? And so when we talk about types of desire and cultivating responsive desire, we're saying, okay, sometimes when you're not in the mood, you say, no, I'm not in the mood. I'm going to bed. Cool, chill. By the way, another benefit of sex is it helps you sleep better. But sometimes you say, no, I'm not in the mood. And other times you say, you know what? I'm not in the mood, but let's see what I can do to get in the mood. What can I think about? How can I touch myself? Can I use this toy? Can my partner do something for me? And it can't always be about a partner, right? I think oftentimes we look extrinsically to solve our problems, but yes, you want your partner to help cultivate desire, but it's also your job. If you want to. So if you have no desire and you're perfectly chill with it and it's not causing any problems, that is fine. There are people who don't want to have sex. There are, of course, asexual folks who don't experience sexual attraction. That's not to say they don't have sex. There are couples who opt into sexless marriages and it works for them. And I know that also freaks people out. If it's not imposed upon you, if there's a differential and one of you wants sex and the other refuses to engage and work on it, sure, is that going to be problematic? Probably. And that is why an estimated 75% of sexless marriages eventually end in dissolution. But if you're not in the mood, you can put yourself in the mood and you're not broken. But I think that the foundation for this also is that the sex has to be good. Right? If you're not getting yours, if you don't know your body, if your partner is not a giving, caring, mindful lover, of course you're going to be less inclined. Yeah. If you offer me like kind of a salad with lettuce that's browning right now, or you offer me a brownie with walnuts, right? I might be hungry for the brownie, but it's unlikely I'm going to be hungry for that salad.
Right. Yeah.
I also heard somewhere that, and it was a quote somewhere, maybe even on Instagram or random, but that foreplay starts as soon as you wake up. And it has a lot to do with the energy in the room, how you communicate with each other throughout the day, the things you do for each other that are non-sexual that then later lead you into being in the mood, right? Because, and we've all had this, you start off with a bad morning and you're scrapping about something. You know, your husband goes off to work or something, he comes back and he wants to get laid. You're like, no, fuck you. I'm still mad about like 6 hours ago or whatever, the mood, right?
100%. So you can take a pill to help with hormones, but it's not going to help with relational issues. Totally. It's not going to help with 10 years of resentment. Right. It's not going to help with division of labor that leaves you doing all of the work.
Pasta will help with 10 years of resentment.
Absolutely. Pasta helps with all of those things. But does that tie into eroticizing daily interactions? Like that's what you mean by that, no?
Absolutely. So we're not light switches. You can't go from talking about your taxes, your kids' bowel movements, whether your dog's stomach is better, to all of a sudden like, oh, hello. How are you? Most people require some sort of a transition. And you're absolutely right. The foreplay begins at the end of the last sex session. So maybe it's that morning for tonight. Maybe it's Monday for Friday. However often you opt to have sex, you have to weave not just eroticism, but also levity into your life. Like those of us, for example, in Canada, many of us have very fortunate lives. And we spend a lot of time focusing on what makes us less fortunate. We spend a lot of time comparing ourselves to folks whom we perceive as better off. But if we can bring some levity and gratitude and enjoying life, right? From the moment you wake up, you know, I always tell people, and some people love it, some people hate it, but can you put your head on your partner's chest and just listen to their heartbeat in the morning? Even for people who like to move around and maybe aren't as mindful as we should be, like me, there's something grounding and humanizing and frightening about listening to this little muscle that keeps this person alive? Because we can get into the weeds around they didn't do that, or I do more of this, or I'm frustrated with something that happened with three weeks ago that we didn't talk about. But can you be playful with one another? Can you laugh? Can you joke around? Can you flirt? And eroticized interactions, just for folks, isn't like every time I eat a banana, I don't want Brandon to be like, yeah, you eat that banana, Jess. No, screw off. I just mean a little bit of lightness, a little bit of fun, teasing, admiring your partner. They piss you off. Look at their butt. Look at whatever turns you on about them, and just look at them like a piece of meat.
Right.
Or tofu for the vegetarians. Like fried bean curd. I love that.
As long as it's marinated in something,
right?
It's okay. Yeah, it's true. And I don't know if this is legitimate or not, but do you think it's harder for men sometimes to stay in that? Because I feel like with women, we're so much about the energy in the room. We feel things so deeply, and sometimes it's harder for men. Like what I find anyways, is they can compartmentalize those things, right? So they can have a bad day with you or have a stressful day at work, but then like switch it off, where I don't think women necessarily can do that, because maybe we're just emotionally more involved in it too.
Or it might just
I don't know.
take
It
more
might
for us
not
to
be
get
a
aroused.
man-woman thing, but I just find that
I think you're right that there's a split. It's obviously not universal. Like we are seeing more, as men become more emotionally literate.
Right.
And not detached from their feelings, we are seeing the data shift. We know that men are just as emotional as women. We know from brain scans that the emotional centers of their brain are just as reactive to emotional stimuli, but they are less likely to express it. And so as younger generations become more in touch with their feelings, more honest about their feelings, as men are allowed to experience a broader range of feelings, we are seeing that it
for
becomes
the next generation of lovers.
but it can become less difficult to compartmentalize. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it also has to do with sexual personality. There are folks who are more inclined to use sex to connect versus folks who want to be connected before they have sex.
Right. I think that's
100%.
really important.
Same thing with stress.
I feel like they marry each other.
Yes, always. But stress is a good point, because some of us use sex to de-stress, and some of us can't have sex if we are stressed, right? So I always ask people to think about their core erotic feelings. So that is the emotion that you require in order to potentially get in the mood for sex. Do you need to feel relaxed? Do you need to feel wanted? Do you need to feel sexy? Do you need to feel loved and safe? Can you figure out what that feeling is, and then invite more of that feeling into your life?
And then communicating that too. So instead of saying nothing, and just being like resentful or pointing the finger and saying you're not doing this, it's more about yourself, like kind of saying, I like this. I need to feel desired. I need this before, so that it helps your partner understand, and it's not kind of
100%, because nobody's a mind reader.
No.
And I always say,
like, you think they are, and I think especially with intimacy, you just think they're gonna get it, and sometimes they just don't know, and sometimes you just have to blatantly say, I like when you do that, I don't like when you do that, or I'm not comfortable when you do that, right? And it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's a myth of compatibility, the notion that you find somebody with whom you're compatible, as opposed to over a lifetime building compatibility. Like, I'm not the same person I was when I met my partner at 21. Too. So I better tell him what I'm into.
Like 50 years together, like you're basically a different person like every decade.
I would hope so.
Yeah,
I would
you
hope
would
so.
Want to be, right? Because you're growing. So where is that? You have to keep the communication lines open. Yeah, I love it.
Can we talk about the fire and ice list?
Oh,
I don't really even know what it is.
Okay,
to be honest.
well, Jess can explain what it is, because I do feel like the benefits of writing things down is so important. And I feel like it's such a practical thing that people can do. So can you give everyone a little rundown?
Yeah, so what I try and do, so I mostly host workshops. That's what I do. I don't see people one-on-one, but my goal is to take the clinical work and make it accessible so that you don't always have to be with a therapist, because a lot of these things you can do on your own. You don't need a facilitator. So the fire and ice list pertains to desire. It pertains to communication. It's exactly actually what you're describing. You make a list of all the things in your life, relational, lifestyle, practical, physical, health related, communication related, all of it. Everything that could potentially light your fire. What are the things that can potentially get you in the mood? Is it something practical, like a lock on your door? So you know the kids aren't coming in. Other practical things. I mean, it sounds so silly, but people say, oh, the kids can hear. Put a white noise machine in your kid's room, in the hallway. Exactly. Yeah. My dad lived with us for a long, long time, and we ran 3 fans. There's like a fan in the hallway, a fan in our bathroom, a fan in our bedroom. I put a fan in his bedroom, and I'm like, all the fans are on.
That's smart.
I mean, you still have to be a little quiet, obviously. But is it something practical? Is it exactly what we were talking about in terms of eroticizing daily interactions? Is it when they send me nice text messages, when they call and think of me, when they bring me a treat, when they do 60-second favors? Is it personal when I work out?
Yeah,
I find I'm more in the mood.
So unrelated too. Like I find like hot places, like if I'm in a hot climate, the sun and the water, that turns me on right away.
Oh yeah, because when I'm at home, like when it's the winter time, I have like socks over my pajama pants.
Like, you're not feeling sexy.
And like multiple layers. Like I don't want to take anything off. But yes, on a tropical vacation, 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
And you're getting dressed and you're relaxed and you're making time for one another. That goes on the list as well. Yeah. I mean, sex is actually very easy, mechanical, the act of it. There's no reason why I can do it better than you can do it better than you can do it. It really is about how we build desire, how we build connection, how we build anticipation and tease. Yeah. Because the most exciting sexual encounters, it has to do what's happening with what's happening in the mind, not necessarily a specific technique.
Well, that's why it's like the anticipation, like you said, and the teasing is so important, the flirting, the dating. So if you've been married for a long time, you just do everything together. You're at home, you got schedules, you got routines. Like that's so unsexy. The sexy part of like dating and stuff is you don't see those people that often. You have something to look forward to. You send each other sexy messages, or you know what I mean? Like it's different than with your, you see that person every day and you're going, especially for parents. Like,
well, parents of young children.
Yeah. Like
absolutely. Like it's really difficult.
Yeah.
When you have a young child to like do basically any of the things. But when you have a young child, that's where the monogamish idea I think is important, because you can like call on past experiences that like really did turn you on. And if that's in your head, like while you're maybe trying to get into the space or when you're trying to like get your desire up with your partner, like you can call on whatever you need to call on. You can bring that in. If you're only bringing it into your mind, you're not bringing it into your bedroom.
Exactly. You can talk about things that you would never do. You can fantasize about things that you'd never want to do in real life. But we have to, as you said, not just write it down, but bring it into focus, because a lot of the times people don't know what they want. If I ask somebody what their fantasies are, they generally can't answer. But if I can think about all the things that lay the groundwork for wanting sex, and then also the opposite, which is to think about the ICE list. What destroys my desire?
I think that's really important too.
So we need to go into it and say, what am I going to do to minimize the ICE column? What can I do? And what can I ask of my partner or others? And what am I going to do to build up that fire? Like, what is the kindling along the way?
Yeah. I like that it's stuff that you can do as well. Like if you look at that list and you're like, oh, you know what? I can knock that.
Yeah, like it's in your control.
Yeah, that's really empowering, because sometimes when you feel like, oh, I need to communicate about sex, like how am I going to tell my partner that they need to do this, that, or the other?
Some things are hard. Like for women that like after a baby and your body takes how long to get back to its normal state? Like
9 months
or
at least.
Like a year at least or something. Yeah. So on top of it, as a woman, you're not feeling great about your body. And then how do you explain that to a man who's just like, I don't know, you're hot, I'll stick it in. And you're like, no, I like look at, you feel like not yourself and you don't feel like you're in your own body.
That's a big thing.
And I think it's a big thing. Definitely.
But pleasure is the answer.
Yeah.
Right. We start like to feel better about our bodies. We think, well, I don't want pleasure because I don't feel good in my body. But what I've found across the work that I do, pleasure is often the question. People want more of it, but pleasure is also the answer, right? When your body performs for you, when your body serves you, it's like the reason why dancers and athletes feel good in the body is that this body is not just for looking at, right? This body isn't meant to be adorned. It's not just for aesthetic pleasure. It's all sorts of pleasure. And so when people are working on body image issues, which really goes in that fire and ice list, right? Like if I'm speaking negatively about myself, if I'm criticizing my body, if I'm complaining about my body, if I'm surrounding myself with friends who do the same, because body image is contagious, I have to think about how to melt that ice. Oh,
that
absolutely.
Makes sense, though. I mean, if everybody's complaining about that, and like feeling shitty and feeling fat or feeling ugly or something, then you're gonna really you are the company you keep.
Absolutely.
So hang out with people that tell you you're sexy all the time.
And challenge it too, disrupt the norm.
Yes.
This is something I started maybe 10 or 15 years ago when people would get together and complain like, oh, my arms, this, my hips, that. I would just say something I like about my body, which is weird and I'm sure makes me seem super obnoxious. But this is the vessel that carries me through life.
Mm-hmm.
I've been so fortunate to see so many naked bodies in my life, in my work, right? When I was 26, I went to this resort called Desire Resorts. And all these women who were twice my age were walking around with 10 times the confidence I had ever considered I could get. And I looked at them and I remember thinking like, whatever they've got, that's what I want. Not their bodies, but I want to feel the way they feel regardless of my body and feel worthy regardless of my body. And so this is the vessel that carries me through life. And I want to live till I'm old. It's not something where I'm like, oh, I have to fix this or fix that. And it's fine if you want to, change things, of course. But if we expend our energy hating our bodies, it's really hard to derive pleasure from them. And if we don't derive pleasure from our bodies, it's easy to hate them. So it's quite a circular
Spend some
process.
time loving your body.
Spend some
What
time
was
with Caribbean people, with Caribbean ladies. That's cultural, babe. I'm telling you right now, from one Jamaican gal to another, it's like that is a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Jamaican women, Caribbean women are like, I'm fucking hot.
Yeah.
In my
What are you going to do
beautiful
about
body,
it?
and what exactly 100%. It's again, if you're the company you keep,
Yeah, and
you should
also
move
just
to the Caribbean.
who was it that with the lotion and making sure you spend time with your body every day?
Yes, Murder She Wrote. What's her name? Angela.
Lansbury?
Yes.
Yes.
There's
Okay,
an
so-
amazing ad from the
Yes.
80s of her with body lotion. And she's like, every day I wake up and I put my body lotion
Yeah.
on. And when I do,
I
I
love
think
it.
about how grateful I am for the arms that work. And I touched my legs and my legs keep me
But if you
standing.
think
And what
about
it's
it,
like
like,
the most beautiful thing ever.
What a
It's
great
so
thing
good.
to do, but you're spending I remember us watching that and finding that, and then I consciously, when I put body cream on after the shower, I think about the things that I love about my body, because you're standing there naked,
Mhm.
you're doing all the things, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I love my body, and then you're more connected to your body. I think not touching yourself like that, not having that human touch, and just looking at it objectively can be really dangerous, right? Because you're comparing yourself against celebrities, media, social media, friends, like whatever. Whereas you spend time with your body physically, it's like the human touch. It's like babies on the,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes a difference. So
I love
hot
that.
tip.
Isn't
I
that
love
good?
And it's so mindful,
Absolutely.
right? To just feel what
And
the
you have
skin
the
feels
time.
like.
It'll take a
Exactly.
few minutes. You're focused on that. It's like very.
In a steamy bathroom.
We
It's kind of
suggest
like
oils. I like oils
Yes.
to lotion.
Yeah, I love a good
So-
oil too. But I do the same with my skincare. Like I take extra long putting it on, and I just
Yeah.
like I'm mindful and I'm
face, you can take-
grateful,
right.
and yeah, it really does. It makes a difference.
I love that. And it goes back to pleasure,
Yes.
right? So I think that our culture stymies pleasure across the board, right?
Yes.
Around what we eat, what we drink, what we're allowed to do, how we're supposed to kind of work out for pain rather than for pleasure.
Yeah.
And so if we are disallowing or judgmental of pleasure outside the bedroom, of course, that's only going to be further intensified inside the bedroom because of the shame associated with sex. So if you're having trouble embracing pleasure, I always ask people to start with something simple, like just eating a truffle, right? Like sometimes in my sessions, we'll have the women pop it in their mouths and just feel it
Yeah.
and eat it mindfully.
Yeah. Let it melt.
And enjoy, and make noises. I get
Right.
them to, let out the, like in Western culture, we're not allowed to make noises when
Right.
we
As
eat.
if we're not allowed to make noises. Like if something's good. I do have a friend, Sasha, which you know really well, which I love her for. If she's eating something good, it's audibly like just the sexiest thing. She's like, oh God. And you're just like, babe, are you okay? But I love that she does it. She feels no ways about it.
Good.
She's like, this is how I feel. I love it. The food is giving her pleasure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like it's okay
She's
to be
gonna let it
audible
out.
about it.
I love that. I love that. And that's a good place to start because some people will hold back in the bedroom because we think we're supposed to sound a certain way,
Yeah.
right? So, in the absence of comprehensive sex ed that depicts pleasure, we turn to porn as education. And that's like watching Fast and the Furious so you can learn how to drive, or watching, watching.
Honestly, though,
no, it's
like,
absurd. It's
porn
really
sounds
absurd.
are so unrealistic.
They're like
Also,
chimpanzees.
Nobody sounds like that when
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my god.
Yeah.
No, babe.
And so we adjust our sounds. We have research with with deaf people and how different deaf people's sex sounds will be perceived. Yeah, because we are all, no matter how empowered we feel, no matter how honest we feel, we are adjusting. Because the truth is, maybe I want to let out like a but I sort of adjust it so I sound less like a horse and more like a baby horse. And I'm like,
a baby horse.
I don't know what do you call a baby horse?
A pony.
A pony is not a baby horse.
I don't know how we just went from sex sounds to ponies, but we did it. We merged the gap.
Did it. Well done, everybody.
Okay, so our next question is dating after divorce or separation. So this is a hot topic in our community, especially in the demo of like the 30 somethings to the mid 40s. They're having aging kids that are more independent. So now they're on their own again and they're trying to figure it out, or they get a divorce or they get separated and they're entering the dating scene. So like, what does that look like?
Ooh.
It's a big topic though, because everyone's going through it. And I know like personally, like through friends and stuff like that, like re-entering the dating game in 2024 when it's all technology. Like we all met our partners the old school way, you know, at a bar, whatever. But re-entering with technology, whether that is the best place or the best way or not is to be debated too, I guess, because you can still meet people in real life. But like, how does that look like? What should people, any hot tips, or how do you get comfortable around it? Where do you start maybe?
Well, I think we know that it's overwhelming. I think dating's overwhelming for everybody, but especially if you've been out of the dating game for 10, 15, 20 years. I always think we start with community. And I see that actually in your Facebook group, in the Rebel Mamas Facebook group. And you have a separate private community where I see that people are supporting each other. They're sharing their stories. They're sharing their experiences. One thing I actually really like about your group in particular is that folks aren't really sharing advice. They're just sharing experiences. Yes. And I think that's so valuable. The perspective is so... to hear how you experienced it. And as someone who's supposedly an expert, I am every day reminded that people's experiences and the sum of them and the context of them are so much more valuable than anything I could ever offer. And so I think that community-based support in dating is so important. And I see it in your groups where people ask questions, they share their stories, but also there's even totally organic introductions happening there.
Yes, there have been a couple.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I really like that. And then, of course, online dating is the reality. It is the norm. I work with Tinder. I'm a huge supporter of technology, connecting people and using technology to our advantage. So Tinder, for example, has a matchmaker feature where I can allow you access so that you can send me recommendations from Tinder as a friend or family member without even downloading the app, right? Because maybe you're married and you don't want to have the app on your phone.
Yeah.
But I think
once again, it's for work. I'm being a good friend.
Now we can say it's for work too.
I think community is really important. I also think that this is another thing that I think I learned from Tinder, which is looking for green flags, because I think we go out there kind of with our dukes up, looking for red flags. Yes. And we all know what the red flags are. We all have instincts to protect ourselves. Women, we go through our entire lives protecting ourselves. I've had a change in work where I used to travel a lot for work by myself constantly. And now my partner's been traveling with me. And for the last 2 years have felt so freeing because I let my guard down. I don't have to be careful. I don't have to worry that someone sees my hotel room. I don't have to check behind me when I get into the car. So we expend so much energy keeping ourselves safe. We have those instincts. Now we're not going to let that guard down. Obviously, we're still going to be safe, but we also want to tune into the green flags. So look for what you love. Tell the stories of what was positive, because we're so quick to call and say, oh my God, you're not going to believe what this guy did. Yeah. But I'd love for us to say, oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what this guy did. Right. Even if it's not a match, even if it's not a love connection, there's all, what I'm hearing too is that people are making friends through dating.
Oh, that's great.
So we can have that kind of, we call it NATO dating.
Sometimes you meet people through friends. Like you just have to be open to it.
And
I just feel like
letting go of types.
Right.
Oh.
Not going in with a checklist. I always want people to feel on a date, not analyze on a date. Like, how are you feeling?
Yeah. And especially, and I feel like, a lot of the hesitation maybe around apps and stuff like that is that it's so quick to judge, right? That people can judge you on your look and your like quick bio and your stats, and they're like next, or they see you once and ghost you and they don't need to see you again because they don't really know you. You're just some person from the internet. So there is that worry too, but
we need to fix our behavior on all ends.
Yeah,
like
everyone's a hot mess.
We really do. And we can't treat casual relationships as though we can treat people casually. Just because something's casual doesn't mean we shouldn't be respectful and caring and communicate. I mean, most people are good people. And it is, or we mostly comport ourselves in a fair and reasonable and respectful way. And we've all messed up. Right? We've all done some version of ghosting in our lives, if not to a date, to someone in business, to a friend, to an acquaintance.
Putting guys in friend zones. Kindly and compassionately, though.
But that is, isn't it? What we're trying to date with compassion for ourselves.
I think now more than ever, it's really important.
And we're really hard on ourselves, right? We worry about how I think we don't have to worry so much about being judged and just worry about whether it feels good in the moment. I always tell people, like, check in with your head and your tail. Are you tense? And if you are, let it go so you can actually enjoy yourself. And you're going to have experiences that aren't perfect, right? Just like you have interactions with friends that aren't perfect, and you have friendships that go up and down. So I don't think we want to give up on dating or connection just because of one or two bad experiences. And of course, we always want to be practicing the, safety measures to make sure that we're safe. Like you can share your date with your friend if you're on some of these apps, or just letting people know where you're going and
turn on location services.
Exactly. And sharing in these groups, because I will see people share, oh, this happened, he said this, and people will say, whoa, let me give you a fresh perspective that maybe your best friend won't give you.
Right. Yeah, because they don't want to compromise the relationship.
To talk to people that are unbiased and don't know you.
That third party.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's take one last quick break. And when we get back, we're going to take audience questions. So stay tuned.
We are forever on a mission to find natural skincare products that actually work. And dare we say, we found the unicorn. And it's called Birch Babe. Birch Babe and Birch Baby is a female and family-led award-winning sustainable skincare, clean beauty, and baby care company created and manufactured right here in Canada. We are absolutely in love with their product line. Our current favorites include their Natural Glow Face Serum, Golden Hour Brightening Vitamin C Serum, their lip and cheek tints, perfect for lazy makeup people like us, and their Skin Food Body Balm. To try any of their 60-plus products for yourself, visit them online at www.birchbabe.com and use code RebelMamaBB15 at checkout for 15% off your first order.
Okay, Madame, we have listener mail for you. So let's just dive right in. This one is titled Reigniting the Spark. And I quote, I feel like all the spark in my marriage is gone and I'm living with a roommate instead of a partner and lover. I'm just not attracted to my husband anymore and I'm a bit resentful toward him. We have a toddler together.
Ouch.
He's a great dad, but I find that we are both too tired for romance most of the time. We have been together almost 10 years. He's not very romantic in general and I feel alone in our marriage, like he's not interested in me as a person. When I ask him to say something nice about me, he stays super basic and says things like, you look pretty today. When I ask him to talk to me, he doesn't know what to say. I'm craving more intimacy and passion. I want to feel desired again. What should I do?
I think this is huge.
I think this probably resonates with everybody out there.
With a 2-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
People need that feeling of feeling desired by someone. So that's what she's like.
And I think that's universal.
Yeah.
I think that women are better at admitting that we want to feel desired. A lot of straight men go through their lives never getting to feel desired. Kind of a different conversation around why we should all initiate sex, even if we hate to. But to go back to the passion, Oh, there's a lot there. So number one, the resentment piece, I think, is worth working through separately. If you're feeling resentful, maybe talk to somebody about that so that you can deal with the resentment, because your feeling of resentment is not necessarily dependent on his behavior or his change. This is for you to think about, because once we get like anger, frustration, we can manage, but resentment is very serious, and that's a deeper groove. So
it's piled up usually over.
It is, yeah. People often, I'm in the space, so people want to undo 12 years of resentment with a one-day workshop.
Right.
So I would say nip that,
like, ma'am,
sir. Nip that in the bud. And then I think you need to let him know how you're feeling, that like, I love you so much. And maybe start with the positive in terms of reminiscing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we did this and I loved it so much. I loved the way you did this. I loved when we did this together. And I find that we have become co-parents, and I want you.
That's like a true shit sandwich. Like, do you know the concept of a shit sandwich, where you like start with something nice and then you just slide the shitty thing in between, and then you close it off with something nice.
This is a very real thing for parents, where they feel like co-parents. And just roommates.
And it has to do with conversation. Yeah. Oftentimes our conversation becomes reduced to what I call the dark triad of mundanity. You only talk about your kids, your work, and your schedules. And that is not exciting. It is not sexy. It doesn't make me want to rip your clothes off. It's not, you would never do that. If I went on my first date and all I did was tell you about what happened at work and what Sheila said. Right. Like, or the weather. No. Yeah. So I have, conversations. I have a podcast, the Sex with Dr. Jess podcast, and I can actually send you some resources to say, like, you know what? I was listening to the Rebel Mama podcast and they were talking about passion, and I want more of that with you. Will you have this conversation with me? Just having deeper, more philosophical, more thoughtful, more even contentious conversations can help to reignite passion. So number one is changing your conversation so that when you do make time on date night, you're not just talking about your kid and your schedules and your jobs. And you have to be intentional about that. You can Google questions, or I can send them to you.
I think the resources are that's a hot tip. And that's like a really easy thing you can do, is find podcasts, your podcast, Esther Perel is one of our favorites, articles out there, and like send those links through as like a conversation starter. Hey, can you listen to this? And then we have a date night, we talk about it. I find that worked for me, because
that's great.
Then they have time with it themselves. They can think about it, they can read it, listen to it, and then you get together and you talk about it. I like when she said this. I understand that. That's how I feel too. What did you feel? Oh, well, I don't really agree when she said that. It's like, it's interesting.
No, I really like that. I like what you're saying about letting them spend time with it alone first. I'm going to send you the Passion Interview podcast.
Yes. Okay.
And then they can give it a try. And you don't even have to like it. I always tell people, even with my work, I'm like, you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but if you can talk to your partner about why you disagree with me,
totally,
that's valuable.
100%.
Right? What I have to say is irrelevant. So there's the conversations, and then there's probably something around time. And when things are important to us, whether it's our kids or our jobs or our families, we make time for it. But oftentimes with the person we live with, it's leftovers. We do not intentionally carve out time. And so whatever time you can get, you need to carve, right? You need to say, you know what, we're going to spend half an hour while, after we put the kid to bed, just sitting and drinking wine without our phones. And that's another thing, technoference. I'm really seeing the role of technology detract from passion in relationships. When we could be using it for good things, we're not. When you have that half an hour after you put the kid to bed, of course you're going to pick up your phone and scroll. Of course you're going to check in on your emails, but we have to create spaces that are free of technology if we want to ignite passion. And then I would also say, focus on your own passion, because sometimes we'll see something as a deficit in the relationship, but it's actually not relational. It has to do with our own lives. So do you have passion? Do you have desire? Do you feel sexy on your own? And if not, what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you doing that's fun? What are you doing that's exciting? And do your own thing.
Yeah.
I think also, I know this sounds unsexy and scheduling and stuff like that. Not saying that, but treating it as importantly as you do the other things, like your kid's schedule and your work schedule. Once a meeting is in there, you take the meeting, right? But with your love life, you can kind of let it fall to the side. So I find what helped me personally was sort of like, we don't make a time and a date for sex, because that's just not something I would do, but we do make a time and a date like for date night, and then we treat it like a meeting. Like it has to happen. We don't have phones. We're listening, actively listening, looking through each other's eyes and talking. Otherwise, it's like a secondary thing. You're like, you're on your phone. You're kind of
going
talking,
through the
not
motions.
really listening. So you have to treat it with the same respect almost as the other thing in your life.
I agree. And what you're doing is like you're carving out time, but you're building anticipation. So people always go back to, oh, when we first met, we tore each other's clothes off. It was so spontaneous. It wasn't spontaneous. You carved out a whole night.
Yeah.
You shaved your legs. You changed your sheets. You did all these things. And there was nothing spontaneous about it. And even in terms of scheduling, I noticed like for my story, when I used to travel without Brandon, I know that before I leave, we're going to have sex. It's scheduled. It's not in our calendar, but I know that we're going to make time, even if it's like super quick before he drives me to the airport.
I'm having sex with you before I go.
And it's actually kind of nice to be on the schedule. Even if it's not an actual invite, we know it's going to happen. And we prioritize it because we know I'm going to be gone for X number of days. So we got to like get it in.
Right.
And so I think that parents oftentimes have to treat it that way. If you know your kid is having a nap, if you know you can get a sitter, if you know
they're at a program.
Yeah, or they're at a program or whatever the case may be, you have to treat it like it's urgent. And I also get that you're exhausted, right? Yeah. So I always say to people, like, use every resource at your disposal to take care of yourself. And you know that. You don't take care of yourselves first. You take care of your kids first.
Yeah.
And there's a cost to that. And there's a reason why, we joke about like once you have kids, it's a boner killer, but it's the data supports that marital satisfaction plummets after kids, and it takes up to like 18 to 20 years to come back up.
That's insane.
18 to 20. Nice.
And you're not gonna stay together.
Throw in perimenopause in there.
Yeah, you're not gonna stay
Some
together.
Hormonal changes.
That's why we're seeing silver divorce on the rise. That's why we're seeing people 55 and up divorcing, because they thought they could refocus their attention on their kids, and that's a very dangerous dynamic where we're no longer looking at each other. You mentioned looking in the eyes. We're no longer looking at each other. We're looking at the kid and talking at each other.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Okay, let's get to the next question. This one is called Communication SOS. How do you effectively communicate with your partner? I feel like my husband and I are really bad at communicating with each other, and I'd like to work on it. When we argue, it turns into a full blow up every time. I feel like the problem for me is I'm unable to communicate exactly what I want or need, and I'm never able to get my point across. And his issue is that he just ends up getting enraged and calls me all sorts of names and goes off on unnecessary tangents. I know. That's like the thing that I sent you, or if I was a therapist, it should be like, leave your husband.
If he's calling you names, that's pretty serious.
Right.
I'm always going to say talk to a professional, but I understand that not everybody is going to or can do that. I give people scripts around do this, not that. So first of all, you need to talk about, you need to talk about contentious issues when it's not the middle of a fight. So when things are calm, nobody wants to have these serious conversations because they don't want to disrupt the smooth sailing. But you need to be able to go and say like, hey, feeling really good with you. There's something I want to talk to you about. Don't want to wreck the mood. Like just say the things that you're feeling. Don't want to wreck the mood, but it's super important to me. Is now a good time? And then you can say, the other day when I came home really upset about work, what I was looking for was ABC. And that's when we use the language of when I'm upset about work, I want you to shut up and listen. I don't want you to give advice. When I'm upset about my family, I want you to, I'm just going to go back to mine, which is always shut up and listen. Because we have these formulas for ourselves. Like my partner, when he had problems at work, he would want me to weigh in. And so that's what he'd do for me. Whereas I really just, my formula is shut up and listen.
Yeah, you just need to get it out. And that's
but I think the language of when this happens, I want this and I don't want that. And being able to, like sometimes people will take this exercise to their therapist. Like I give them the handout and I'm like, just do this with your therapist. But you can also just do it on your own. So I think you have to have those conversations. And then if it's a communication issue, you might want to try individual therapy. If you're both willing to admit what the issue is, because, when you're a couples therapist, you're dealing with three beasts, like person one, person two, and then the dynamic that they've created. And so sometimes it can be helpful to focus on person one and person two separately before you come together.
I think that's a great
tip. Sorry, I just want to share my personal hot tip with communication, because I do think in those volatile moments, like you said, it's like impossible to have the conversation, and then you don't want to disrupt the peace, or you're just living in distance and space because you don't want to deal with it. What's helped me and us is writing.
Yes.
So sometimes I'm much better in articulating and expressing my thoughts in writing. And then that helps my brain sort out how I want to say something.
Love it.
And I've also realized that for my partner, for example, the writing between us is a lot better too. So it's a lot harder to say things. For me sometimes, for him definitely. But when we text it to each other and we're not home together and we're talking about it on text, it's easier to write it out and leave it there, and then you spend time with it and think about it rather than saying it. So that is a tip I would like to share because I think it's very helpful.
But you can still use Jess's formula for that.
Yeah.
But I love the writing because so many old therapists, I remember when I started in this field, they were always like, you don't resolve arguments over text. And I remember I was young and I was like, well, I do.
Yeah.
Right? Like
I think that's my style
because
too,
I'm not going to accidentally say something stupid
and
over
you're
text.
thinking about what you're saying.
Yes.
You see
editing.
the words
I'm
in front of
editing.
you.
I'm like,
sometimes
oops.
you say,
I read that in my...
ChatGPT, make this nicer, okay?
Make me sound nice.
Make it sound like I love them. Shit sandwich.
Yeah.
and then they can
please.
think about it too, because
Yeah.
sometimes you say things and then you're not sure. Anyways, it's all.
Well, and the prevailing advice is always don't resolve things over text. Don't argue over text because it lacks tone and nuance. And I really think that that's old school advice. I think it needs to be updated. I think we need to get the data on how effectively with friends, with parents, and with partners,
Absolutely.
we communicate over text. I think that's a super important point. And I think there's a huge generation gap and a gap in the literature as well, where therapists are not supporting this approach. And I'm sure younger ones are, I hope. And maybe some of the older ones, like those old dogs learning new tricks.
Yeah.
But I do remember when I first came into the field, they were so hard on me for suggesting text. And I'm so glad to hear people just sharing their stories that it works.
Honestly, tone, if you want to fix it, you can fix it with grammar and emojis.
Emojis.
It's really not that bad. Like if
Hi,
you're
babe,
putting
heart.
if it's just like if it's no emojis and then everything's a period, like in text that can come off really harsh. But if you leave it a little bit softer, if you throw in a heart once in a while.
A peach. If you just put a peach in.
Yeah, a peach at the end.
Water, maybe an eggplant if you're feeling spicy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it. It's so easy to convey emotion over text. People don't
For
get
me
it.
too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but some
100%.
people, if they're not grammatically inclined, do you know what I mean? And they send you something, it can be really easy to misread depending on your own mood. So if you're in a really shitty mood that day because of whatever, right? You didn't sleep enough, your hormones, whatever. And someone sends you a text that is meant to be, maybe they want to start a conversation. You can take it in a bad way because of the day you're having, and now you're projecting your shit on that.
And that happens in person too.
Yeah.
100% that happens in person too.
Like the timing is so important. That's why with all of these, I'm always saying, is this a good time?
right.
Right.
Yeah,
And if
that's
they're
a
going to
great
always
thing to
put it
ask.
off, because let's be honest, there are people who are avoidant. Listen, if people aren't going to engage with you, if you've got partners who aren't going to engage, there's not a lot we can do.
Right.
And this is why people are leaving. And I'm not saying people should give up on relationships, but we have a short life to live. And I don't know how many more years or decades we have,
Yeah.
but it's not going to get better on its own. It will get worse on its own, left alone. So if you've got a partner who's not willing to put in the effort, that to me is the compatibility issue. Compatibility is about being willing to put in a similar amount of effort to make things work, whatever that looks like. But if you are carrying the burden, it's really hard to make a relationship work. You can make your life work for yourself, but they have to play a role.
That's right. Okay. Should we do the last one? Incompatible sex drives in a relationship. Hubby and I have had ups and downs all through our relationship. One of the constant battles has been his high need for sex and my inability to give him what he needs. I try my best. I make an effort at least once a week. This woman
That's
is
good.
a fucking queen to engage on my end. And he also, if he engages at a different time as well, I'll roll with it. No matter how much I express that I'm burnt out and exhausted, he assumes that my lack of sex initiation and desire is a result of me not being attracted to him. I get it. It's an ego thing, but I try my freaking best. I even suggested that we loosely schedule it, but he said we shouldn't have to schedule sex. Am I crazy? No, babe, you're not crazy.
No. And you do have to schedule sex. Do you schedule vacations? Do you schedule meals? Do you just eat whenever you feel like it? No, you schedule. I mean, some of us do eat whenever we feel like it, but if you've got kids, I think you schedule your meals. Listen, that part about his feeling as though you're not attracted to him, you're making an effort, you're expressing desire and attraction, that piece is really his.
That's
to
what
work
I'm
out.
thinking too. Okay,
That
I'm
is
happy that you
his.
said that. That's a you problem.
Yeah.
babe.
Yeah. And
Not
I mean,
you, the person that asked him.
the partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're initiating once a week and you're rolling with it if he initiates more. So you're
Right?
already having sex. I know that averages aren't that important, but you are having sex more than average.
Yeah.
Right. So couples are having sex on average in their 40s with kids there's data, you know, different data sets, but on average, we're looking at about 2 to 4 times a month. So weekly to bi-weekly, somewhere in there. You're already having the sex. You're trying to get yourself in the mood. You're talking about it, it sounds like. So I feel like you're on the right track. I think that he has to do the work to deal with his own attraction.
She suggested counseling here, and he doesn't want to do it. So
Shocking.
I do feel like that's his responsibility at this point, because she is trying.
Yes, and
So
I'm
he's
really
gotta do
tired of the
something.
low desire partner being pathologized as broken. Like, you need to come up. Listen, he has a hand.
Yes.
You can buy him a Tanga egg. You can buy him the arc wave. Like, there's lots of other things to do. I am curious about fire and ice for this person. Like, what would make you want sex more? And it sounds like for you, the issue is exhaustion.
Yeah.
So what is it that you can take off your plate, that he can take off your plate, that you can pay for to have more time for it? Because I'm assuming you like sex since you're making the time for it. But you will probably start to like sex less if you're doing it solely to oblige him. If there's a sense of pressure, if his validation is rooted in your having sex with him,
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
that is a burden.
Yeah.
So I think you need to let him know over and over again that you're very attracted to him. And I am curious if he actually feels that way, or if that's, and this may not be the case, but it can be also a weaponization. You know, if you're not having sex with me, how do I trust that you're attracted to me? Well, you need to build that trust separately.
Yeah. And he needs to like build up his own confidence separately too. Like you shouldn't need that outward validation all the time. Maybe a little bit every once in a while.
Sure. Of course.
But like, oh my God, a couple times a week?
Yeah.
Just, bro, get
Yeah.
a hold of
With a
yourself.
toddler.
Yeah.
With a toddler.
He's winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy's doing just fine, I'll say.
Yeah, he just needs therapy.
Okay, before we let you go, we have to play a game of overrated or underrated.
Okay.
Because it's our fave. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, overrated, underrated. So that's pretty much all you have to answer, unless you have your 2 cents for each one. We'll take it.
Too much
I'm
to
sure
say.
we
You
do.
know I have too much to say.
All right. So first one, sex toys.
Underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you would say that.
Yeah.
Swinging. Is it trendy right now?
No, I would say underrated, but it's the language of it and the branding of it that's shifting, because swinging is language that maybe people kind of like we're the same age, so kind of older than us use. I think that the playfulness is underrated, but it doesn't have to be swinging, because swinging is often rooted in very heterosexual norms, very male-centric norms around pleasure, swapping wives, and it doesn't have to be like that. It can be more playful.
Okay. Porn.
Oh, probably overrated. I think
That's
it's
what I would say.
I think it's
too.
context based. I think as a model for what sex ought to look like, hugely overrated, and that's not what we should use. I do think it's underrated from the perspective of it can be really useful. It can be great for couples. It can be great to reignite desire, libido,
Not all porn
passion.
is bad either. There's some like really good
Ethical
storylines
porn?
out there.
Ethical
they're
porn,
just like very
yeah.
sensual and like nicely shot cinema.
You're
Cinematic.
watching porn for the storyline?
No, like not really, but
It's the
just
music.
for the visual.
I like the
music.
soundtrack. Yeah, I mean, if you're paying for your porn, it's probably ethical. If you're not paying for your porn, there's a good chance it isn't.
Okay.
Good to know. Kissing, overrated. Or
Oh,
underrated?
underrated.
I know.
Yeah. Everybody wants more kissing.
It's hard for people to do, I think, if they've been in long-term relationships, though. Like to make out with your husband after 20 years and like 3 kids, you're like,
with
ew,
tongue.
wow.
Ew.
Yeah.
Are you putting your tongue in my mouth?
Are you Frenching me?
Gross.
Did you French?
Yeah. Well, then you're always scared that like if one of the kids is sick and like you think that maybe your partner like might be on the way to getting sick,
Oh.
you're like, just kiss my neck. It's fine. Just like keep it
Neck
down
kissing
here.
is pretty hot.
Neck kissing
True,
is a good
true.
time.
Okay, date nights,
Underrated.
underrated. Make those date nights.
And take turns planning them.
Oh.
Like I usually tell people that there should be like you plan one, they plan one, and then there's some sort of spontaneous surprise one.
Okay, good tip. Butt play.
Probably underrated.
Okay.
Yeah, but especially for people with prostates. So when hetero couples ask about anal, they're always asking about him putting something in your butt, but his is the one with the G-spot in it. So take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Turn it around on them.
Yeah.
How would you like it in your ass?
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, and they
Turn it
shouldn't put
around.
anything in your butt if they've never put something in their butt, because
I
they don't
wholeheartedly
understand.
agree.
They don't understand how
I
the muscles work.
wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a golden
It's
rule.
like if I'm gonna do it, you're gonna do it first, and we'll see how you like it. Yeah. Blowjobs.
Overrated.
Overrated.
Just kidding. No, they're overrated because it's this thing that we're always supposed to do. It becomes very performative. You're supposed to be good at it. In that sense, underrated because there's so much power.
There is. And if you're really into it and someone actually, like, you feel that desire to do it, it's a whole different blowjob than those mandatory ones.
You have power,
yeah,
but you're also subjugated. So that feeling, that tension between being submissive and dominant can be really hot.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's I think the gap in gender or gap in reciprocity around oral sex.
Last one, threesomes.
Overrated. It's like porn makes us think that you get a pizza and automatically you get a threesome. Pizza's getting cold, but they're going at it. Monsters, eat the pizza first.
Yeah, you're like, I have my eye on the pizza.
Let's invite a fourth.
Yeah,
pepperoni.
exactly. Yeah. I'll eat the pizza and you guys go for it. Okay, one last question while you're here. It's slightly off topic in terms of the conversation, but we couldn't let you leave without asking your biggest tip when it comes to talking to kids about sex.
Yeah, so this is my background. Like my doctoral work, I come from a teaching background. If I had to pick something practical, it's use popular culture as a third-party bridge. So talk about the shows you're watching. Ask them what they understand about the language in a song you're listening to. Ask them how they feel about a character's interaction. What do you know about the language they're using? Because if you ask them about themselves or their friends, or they feel that it's directed at them in kind of a face-to-face rather than shoulder-to-shoulder conversation, it can feel overwhelming. They can get embarrassed, which is fine. But if you talk about third-party fictional characters, it can be really, really helpful. And I use this with couples as well. Like I'll show a scene on jealousy, and then we talk about how we feel about the characters, you know, and this is what I did when I was teaching high school, was I was always trying to use the pop culture they were consuming, the media, and just have a conversation about it because it gives you insights into how they feel. This is for all age groups. And the other big thing is keep the conversation going. Like it's not about having the talk. It's an ongoing talk, and admit that you're awkward. It's okay to say like, you know, my mom never talked to me about this stuff, so it's super hard, but I really want to because I want you to have a good marriage in the future or happy relationships in the future or pleasure. I want you to know that your body is your own. So if you're feeling something, it's okay to say it. You don't have to be a pro. You don't have to be an expert. You can stumble over your words. You can laugh. You can take things back. You can say you don't know it. Oh, one other super important tip in the digital age is if they have a question that you can't answer or that you could use help answering, say, you know what? I'd actually like to learn more about that. And then take them to a site so that when
they're learning together,
they're knowing that they're learning that site is better than just searching on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. We definitely don't want them searching on YouTube or just generally searching for anything.
And there's a
how do I have sex?
Yeah.
So like,
exactly.
have fun with that.
But
Google
that's
search.
what kids would do now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they have that tool.
Oh, it's a different landscape.
Well, and they also just have so much information at their hand, like at the tips of their fingers. Like at the schoolyard, my son's 10 for context, and like they're all in elementary school. That's super young, but they're making jokes about 69ing. They don't even know what the fuck it means. Oh. But I'm like, where are you hearing this? Where you been? Older siblings for sure. That's one. But, you know, you might as well have those conversations with them and create a safe space at home because they're getting it anyways.
Right. They have the information. What we bring is the context.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just information overload.
That's
good,
a good
hot
quote,
tips. Babe. Okay, well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Tell us where people can find you on the internet and beyond.
happiercouples.com, and I'll post my schedule on Instagram. So if I'm coming through your city, you can come check out an event.
Oh, yay. That's a good idea. And then, I mean, do you have anything coming up? Any book release?
I have no more books. Hopefully,
books.
I should have brought you my book. I'll send you one.
Yes,
hopefully,
please.
No more books because writing books is not my favorite
I know,
thing.
It's the
crazy sister.
But I'm just on the road doing these couples workshops, so I'm having a really good time.
You should read that book.
Yeah.
Maybe we do a book club.
Actually, The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay is really about communication. It has so many different scripts and almost some case studies and tools that you can use. It's really a practical handbook if you want to check it out.
Scripts are so helpful, I feel like. In this day and age, it's like scripts are the number one thing.
Yes, because we always say, oh, communication is so important. But what's communication? Just saying anything that rolls off the tip of your tongue and regretting it?
No.
Right. We also have to think about how do we structure these conversations and how do we listen?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for being here. And thank you to our lovely listeners for tuning in again to the Rebel Mama podcast. As always, we'd love for you to like, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen, and feel free to share it with a friend who you think would enjoy it. And
watch it on YouTube.
You can watch it with your eyeballs. This podcast was produced by Space Monkey inside the Soda Studio. The song you're listening to is called Name a Number off the debut album Unrequited by Roshan. Stream it now on Apple Music.
And thanks to this episode's sponsor, Betadine. To learn more about why they've been trusted by healthcare professionals to help treat and prevent infections for over 60 years, visit www.betadine.ca or find them on our directory at therebelmama.com/directory. When you feel the sign, Betadine.